Today's reading is Part 2 of Vanishing Act, a short story in the collection Stranger Things Happen by Kelly Link. October 10th, 1970. Darling Jenny. We have been staying in Ubud for 3 weeks now, visiting Neoman's church. Every night as we fall asleep, the lizards tick off the minutes like pocket watches. And every morning, Neoman brings us pancakes with honey. Do you remember Neoman? Do you remember the lizards, the length of your pinky? They are green and never blink, watching us, watching them. Neoman asks how you are doing so far away. He and his wife are having their second baby. They have asked us to be their child's godparents and to pick the baptismal name. Would you like the baby to have your name, Rose, if it is a girl? It is sticky here, and we go for walks in the monkey forest, where the old woman sits with her bunches of bananas and her broom, swatting the monkeys away. Do you remember how they scream and fly up into the trees? Aunt Molly wrote that you are quiet as a mouse, and I don't blame you in that noisy family. Love you, Mum and Dad. Hildy knocks on the door of her mother's study. When she opens the door, she can see a cigarette hastily stubbed out, still smoldering in the ashtray. It's only my second, the RM says automatically. Hildy shrugs. I don't care what you do, she says. I wanted to know if you'd take me to the library. I already asked Jenny Rose, but she doesn't need to go. The RM's face is momentarily blank. Then she frowns and taps another cigarette out of the pack. 3, she says. I promise that's it, okay? She's so quiet, it's easy to forget she's here. Except for the wet sheets. I must be the worst guardian in the world. I got a call from one of Jenny Rose's teachers yesterday, and when I put down the phone it flew straight out of my head. She hasn't turned in her assignments recently, and they're worried that the work might be too much for her. Does she seem unhappy to you? Hildy shrugs. I don't know. I guess so. She never says anything. I keep forgetting to write and ask your aunt and uncle if she wet the bed before, the RM says. She waves her cigarette, and a piece of ash floats down onto her desk. Has Jenny Rose made any friends at school besides you and Myron? Hildy shrugs again. She is mildly jealous, having to share her absent-minded mother with Jenny Rose. No, I'm not sure she wants any friends. Mostly she likes to be alone. Can you take me to the library? Sweetie, her mother says, I would, but I have to finish the sermon for tomorrow. Ask your dad when he gets home. Okay, Hildy says. She turns to leave. Will you keep an eye on your cousin, the RM says. On Jenny Rose, I'm a little concerned. Okay, Hildy says. When is Dad coming home? He should be here for dinner, her mother says. But Mr. Harmon doesn't come home for dinner. He doesn't come home until Hildy is already in bed, hours after the library has closed. She lies in bed and listens to her mother shout at him. She wonders if Jenny Rose is awake too. So Hildy and Myron are watching Jenny Rose again as she lies on her bed. They scoot their bare feet along the warm, dusty plank floor of the gazebo, taking turns peering through the binoculars. She hasn't been turning in her homework, Myron asks. Then what does she do all the time? That's why we're watching her, Hildy says, to find out. Myron lifts the binoculars. Well, she's lying on her bed, and she's flipping the light switch on and off. They sit in silence for a while. Give me the binoculars, Hildy demands. How can she be turning off the light if she's lying on the bed? But she is. The room is empty except for Jenny Rose, who lies like a stone upon her flowered bedspread, her arms straight at her side. There are 3 oranges in the bowl beside the bed. The light flashes on and off, on and off. Myron and Hildy sit in the gazebo, the bared twigs of the oak tree scratching above their heads. Myron stands up. "I have to go home," he says. "You're afraid," Hildy says. Her own arms are covered in goose pimples, but she glares at him anyway. He shivers. "Your cousin is creepy," he says. "At least I don't have to share a room with her." Hildy isn't afraid of Jenny Rose. She tells herself this over and over again. How can she be afraid of someone who still wets the bed? It seems to Hildy that her parents fight more and more. Their fights begin over James, mostly, who refuses to apply to college. The RM is afraid that he will pick a low lottery number, or even volunteer, to spite his family. Mr. Harmon thinks that the war will be over soon, and James himself is close-mouthed and non-committal. Hildy is watching the news down in the basement. The newscaster is listing names and dates and places that Hildy has never heard of. It seems to Hildy that the look on his face is familiar. He holds his hands open and empty on the desk in front of him, and his face is carefully blank, like Jenny Rose's face. The newscaster looks as if he wishes he were somewhere else. Hildy's mother sits on the couch beside her, smoking. When Mr. Harmon comes downstairs, her nostrils flare, but she doesn't say anything. "Do Jenny Rose's parents miss her?" Hildy asks. Her father stands behind her, tweaks her ear. "What made you think of that?" She shrugs. "I don't know. I just wondered why they didn't take her with them." The RM expels a perfect smoke ring at the TV set. "I don't know why they went back at all," she says shortly. "After what happened, your uncle felt that Jenny Rose shouldn't go back. They spent a week in a 5x5 jail cell with 7 other missionaries, and Jenny Rose woke up screaming every night for 2 years afterwards. I don't know why he wanted to go back at all. But then I guess, in the long run, it wasn't his child or his wife he was thinking about." He looks over Hildy's head at her husband. "Was it?" she says. November 26, 1970. Darling Jenny, we passed a pleasant Thanksgiving thinking of you in America and making a pilgrimage ourselves. We are traveling across the islands now to Flores, where the villagers have rarely heard a sermon, rarely even met people so pale and odd as ourselves. We took a ferry from Bali to Lombok, where the fishermen hang glass lanterns from their boats at night. The lantern light reflects off the water, and the fish lose direction and swim upwards towards the glow and the nets. It occurred to your father that there is a sermon in this. What do you think? From the shore you can see the fleet of boats moving back and forth like tiny needles sewing up the sea. We rowed in one, the water an impossible green beneath us. From Lombok we took the ferry to Sumbawa, and your father was badly seasick. We made a friend on the ferry, a student coming home from the university in Java. The 3 of us took the bus from one end of the island to Sumbawa at the other end, and as we passed through the villages, children would run alongside the bus waving and calling out, "Orang Bulan Bulan." We arrived on Flores this morning, and are thinking of you so far away. Love, Mom and Dad. Hildy keeps an eye on Jenny Rose. She promised her mother she would. It isn't spying anymore. It seems to her that Jenny Rose is slowly disappearing. Even her presences, at dinner, in class, are not truly presences. The chair where she sits at the dinner table is like the space at the back of the mouth where a tooth has been removed, where the feeling of possessing a tooth still lingers. In class, the teachers never call on Jenny Rose. Only when Hildy looks through the binoculars, watching her cousin turn the bedroom light on and off without lifting a hand, does Jenny Rose seem solid. She is training her eyes to see Jenny Rose. Soon, Hildy will be the only person who can see her. No one else sees the way Jenny Rose's clothes have grown too big, The way she is sealing up her eyes, her lips, her face, like a person, shutting the door of a house to which they will not return. No one else seems to see Jenny Rose at all. The RM worries about James, and Mr. Harmon worries about the news. They fight busily in their spare time, and who knows what James worries about? His bedroom door is always shut, and his clothes have the sweet sour reek of marijuana, a smell that Hildy recognizes from the far end of the schoolyard. Jenny Rose doesn't wet the bed any more. At 9:30 she goes to the bathroom, and then climbs into bed and waits for Hildy to turn out the light. Which is pretty silly, Hildy thinks, considering how Jenny Rose spends her afternoons. As she walks back to her bed in the darkness, she thinks of Jenny Rose lying on her bed, eyes open, mouth closed, like a dead person, and she thinks she would scream if the lights came back on. She refuses to be afraid of Jenny Rose. She wonders if her aunt and uncle are afraid of Jenny Rose. This is a trick that her father taught her in the blackness of the prison cell, when she cried and asked for light. He said, "Close your eyes and think about something good. From before." "What?" she said. "Are your eyes closed?" "Yes." "Good. Now, do you remember when we spent the night on Dieng Plateau?" "Yes." "It was cold, and when we walked outside it was night, and we were in the darkness and the stars were there. Think about the stars." Light. In this darkness, like that other darkness which was full of the breathing of other people, she remembers the stars. There was no moon, and in the utter darkness the stars were like windows, hard bits of glass and glitter where the light poured through. What she remembers is not how far away they seemed, but how different they were from any other stars she had seen before, so bright burning and close. Darkness. Do you remember the Southern Cross? Yes. Do you remember the birds? Yes. She had walked between her father and mother, passing under the bow trees, looking always upward at the stars, and the bow trees had risen upward, in a great beating of wings, nested birds waking and rising as she walked past. The sound of the breathing of the cell around her became the beautiful sound of the wings. Light. Do you remember the 400 stone Buddhas of Borobudur? The 72 Buddhas that were calm within their bells, their cages? Yes? Be calm, Jenny Rose, my darling. Be calm. Darkness. Do you remember the guard that gave you Bubarayam? Yes. Do you remember Neoman? Yes. Do you remember us, Jenny Rose? Remember us. Light.